All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the IAH Zoom Talks series. My name is Andy Perrin. I'm a professor of sociology at UNC-Chapel Hill and the director of the Institute for the Arts and Humanities. I am pleased today to welcome David Kiel for today's talk. Before we do that, though, a bit of housekeeping and Zoom etiquette. If you would please leave your audio, your microphone muted unless and until you're asking a question or making a comment in the conversation. We find that makes the recording and the conversation work better. Once David has finished his talk, we will have time for questions and answers and conversation, which is the lifeblood of the Institute. And we'll do that either through the chat system or through the raise your hand system, but either way, just let me know and I will call on you for those comments and questions. Also on the call today, Ebony Johnson, our fantastic events coordinator for the Institute, will be helping with technical aspects and making sure that the Zoom system works well for us. Again, I'm thrilled to welcome today David Kiel, who doesn't need a huge introduction for most of us. David is a longtime member, champion, and all-around helper to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as well as a great citizen of the Institute and an expert in academic leadership and planning. He's going to talk to us today about the role of the Institute in specific and of other pieces of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and the ways that they have fostered academic leadership and innovation. David was the co-director of the academic leadership program for many years, including when I was a fellow there. And I'm grateful to him already for many lessons I've already learned, and I'm looking forward to more lessons learned today. Today's lecture and conversation will be recorded and will be available on our website following some editing and technical work. So again, thank you, David, for being willing to join us. Thank you to the audience for your interest, and I look forward to the talk.
Okay. Well, Andy, thank you, and thanks to the Institute, and thanks to everyone for showing up today. I'm going to talk for hopefully definitely not more than 25 minutes, and then I'm going to be welcoming comments and questions. And I think anything you have to say or in terms of critique or questions or suggestions will be helpful to me because this is a topic I'm hoping to publish on later in the year. And so this is a great opportunity for me to get feedback from a knowledgeable group of colleagues. I'm going to start my presentation by a brief meditation on the work of Reuel Tyson, who was the founder of the Institute and who passed away this year in late May. So this is a good time to be remembering him. And in particular, Reuel is an exemplar of the kind of leader and innovator that I'm thinking that we at UNC could do a better job of supporting, even though we do a pretty good job right now. And in this talk, I'm going to talk about some ways we can do that. So if we were in Hyde Hall right now, we would see Reuel's portrait smiling down at us. And the portrait clearly identifies him as a very important person in the life of the Institute. And he's an interesting kind of leader. He was a former chair of religious studies, as many of you know. He became disgruntled with the way the university was treating its humanities faculty. And he said, I want to do something about it. He said, the humanities do not have the research opportunities that folks in the sciences do. This is in the late 80s. We're losing some of our best faculty to private institutions, including to one down the road. And the odd thing was he felt that an obligation not just to study this, but to do something about it. Reuel was an interesting guy. As I said, he had studied with Hannah Arendt, with Michel Poligny, and did stints at Yale, Chicago, and Oxford. He was a teacher who was revered by generations of students. But you might be surprised to learn that despite this cosmopolitan profile, he was the proud son of the sheriff of Pitt County, where the university, where East Carolina University is today. And this kind of interesting background shaped his approach, I think. In terms of acting on his concern about the humanities, he just started to do what his father would have called precinct work, and that's the way he described it. And he talked about a brown bag lunch that he set up for professors in the humanities in a variety of departments. And he said they met for weeks and weeks and mostly griped over their brown bag lunches. But eventually they began to turn toward constructive ideas. With some of these ideas in hand, he got Dean Gillian Sell at that time to give him a $5,000 stipend to investigate the problem. He looked at other humanities centers. He talked with other colleagues. He began a concept that became the Institute. He started bring alumni back to campus for real intellectual exchange. Some of you may remember the Autumn Sundays. He lobbied, organized. He pigeonholed influential people throughout the campus. He talked about the importance of his ideas. He recruited a kind of a dream team of colleagues. Buck Goldstein was then an entrepreneur in Atlanta, became first chairman of the board. Lloyd Kramer, former chair of history and now head of public humanities at UNC, was the associate director. Mary Flanagan made a huge contribution as the development director. And he enrolled, very importantly, philanthropists like Tom Keenan and Barbara Hyde, who was a student of his, now a philanthropist, as enthusiastic supporters. So they hit upon the idea of a seminar for faculty where a faculty member would get a semester off. This created really, in effect, a sabbatical for arts and humanities faculty, where Carolina did not have that before. They met around a table, originally at Tiny West House, and exchanged ideas. And this realized Reuel's concept of the community of scholars. And he realized it in one place at one time for a group of faculty. And he fought, people who know Reuel or were part of the Institute know that he fought battle after battle with the powers that be to secure his dream, and that he was an indefatigable missionary to donors. Despite or because of his highly untraditional leadership style, the Institute went from strength to strength. It started out in tiny ancient West House, graduated to the gym-like Hyde Hall that many of us have visited. And there have been 500, maybe there's 600 now, Andy, faculty who benefited from the fellowship program of the Institute. And over 30 years, the IAH team, led by Reuel and others, and his successors, John McGowan and Mike, oh, well, you'll fill in who's your predecessor, Andy?
Mark Katz.
Mark Katz, right. And Andy have raised $50 million to support the arts and humanities. And that's quite a return on the original $5,000 investment that Gene Sell made. So now I want to say that as wonderful as this story is, it's my thesis that the narratives like this one on campus with enough frequency to be recognized as a pattern. And even though Reuel is a one-off kind of leader, some of the kinds of contributions he made are not unique to him. The pattern is this: a maverick or inventive faculty or staff member, where I'm including staff members and even students could be included in this, wake up and says, something's not right, something can be better, something must change, and I can make this happen, and I will make it happen. They start small, they convince others, they gather adherents, they demonstrate success, they find a way to get resources, they build from an institutional or an initial platform, they add programs and features, they fight their way into the mainstream, and they are ultimately adopted by the university. And in the best cases, they have a huge impact on some element of teaching, of research, or curriculum, or student life, that makes Carolina what it is today and realizes our core values of accessibility, equity, public service, quality education. So now I'm going to put up slide 1 with your help. And this, on this slide, is the first of 2 slides, and there are 9 organizations on this slide that are talked about, Carolina organizations that have grown up over the last 30 or 40 years and risen to prominence. And you'll see on the right is associated with each one of these organizations is someone who I'm calling the academic intrapreneur, like Reuel Tyson was for the Institute. So just a quick comment on some of these so that you can get a sense of why they're on this list. Like the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center that Shelley Earp has shepherded for several decades. 5,000 patients a year over that. Many research projects, collaborations with public health to identify health disparities throughout North Carolina, multi-million-dollar research recurring fund from the North Carolina legislature that has survived the tremendous political changes in the university. Our Carolina's medical research capacity would not be anything like it is without the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center. The Carolina Population Center is also there because in any one year, it may be the largest sponsor of research on the campus. And while Barbara Entwistle did not found it, she came along. Now she's the retired vice chancellor for research. Barbara took the population at a time when it was faltering and brought it back online to become what it is today. Entrepreneurs are not only innovators and beginners, they are restorers. Without the genomics program here that Terry Magnuson came from Minnesota to build, we're not a $1 billion research institution. Bob Blumen, when he came here, was the dean, pharmacy was ranked number 14. When he became provost, he was ranked number 1. And with the Eshelman Institute for Innovation that he created with the help of Fred Eshelman, it's put Carolina as in the lead of creating kind of high risk, high gain research initiatives in pharmacy and other health fields. So I'm gonna just say, these are examples. We can go on and on, and I can come back to these, but these are some examples of research initiatives that this entrepreneurial development that I'm talking about has sponsored. So I'll go to slide 2. It's not just research, but it's teaching, campus life, public service. Pat Kiel, who also sadly died about a year ago this time of year, was a champion of inquiry learning. And because of her, thousands of undergraduates now have the opportunity to do original research as undergraduates, something that every major university has now, but we would not have it without Pat. Other curriculum changes, the work that Kelly Hogan and others are doing in making active learning, which is a new office in the college. Buck Goldstein's entrepreneurship minor, which has created that possibility across the campus. Shirley York, who also retired, but her legacy is the Carolina Covenant, which made UNC one of the most accessible universities for low-income students. We wouldn't have had a performing arts program of this world-class quality if Emil Kang had not come and done this. And Carolina probably, maybe in some circles, better known than anything else for its support of women's athletics, and the names of Anson Dorrance and Karen Shelton stand out. And they deserve to be along this list of innovators. Chuck Lovelace, who's retiring from the Moorhead Foundation, doubled the assets in the Moorhead program with a merger with the Kane Foundation, and that has preserved the Moorhead program intact for Carolina for other years. So these are basically the kinds of leaders that I'm talking about, and I'm just saying that it's not just the Institute, but there are many examples all throughout campus where we have this kind of leadership that is innovative, creative, and makes a big contribution. So if I can have the next slide, please. Slide number 3. Okay, so I just want to take a moment before I go through this slide and talk about the difference between the academic intrapreneur and the academic entrepreneur. So the academic intrapreneur is someone like Reuel Tyson who built something innovative within the university. And the academic entrepreneur, the more classic understanding of this type of leadership, somebody who makes a discovery in the university and takes it into the world. And a great example of that is Jody Simone, whose studies in material science led to the creation of the company Liquidia, which has gotten big support from the Gates Foundation and other companies. So, and there are many other companies that have been founded by Carolina entrepreneurs. But I want to talk about the intrapreneurs for a minute. And on this slide, I think they have a passionate desire to fix a problem. So Shirley Orr, for example, thought it was a shame that poor kids graduated burdened down with debt. She decided to fix that. They're in it for the long term. The 18 organizations on my list, all of them have been at least 10 years working at what they're doing, and many for 20 or 30 years. They're adaptable. They find a way or make one in the famous description of Hannibal crossing the Alps. One of my favorite examples of this is when I met the woman who has had the academic, the pediatric asthma program here, whose name will come to me in a minute. And she couldn't get the hospital to fund a key component for her asthma patients. And so she turned to the students and asked them to donate the results of their dance-a-thon, the funds from their dance-a-thon, so she could hire a person who would demonstrate her concept for care. She did, they did, and when it was demonstrated, the hospital then picked up that. So they're very inventive in designing way to get people to help them. They build strong teams, as the example of the Institute is one of these. And I would say also they give to get in the institution, and this is true of the Carolina Population Center, the Lineberger Cancer Center, Mike Cohn's work in global health, is that they spread their resources around, and therefore they get traction with folks throughout the university for their approaches. And I would say some of these characteristics are unique to folks who have to innovate within an academic setting, and they're different maybe from people who can depend entirely on venture capitalists in the outside setting. So I would say these are some things that I noticed in my work with and studies of these kinds of programs over the years. So let me go take this slide off now. And let me pick up on, I think now, what I would say is, I hope that at this point, you are thinking, yes, academic entrepreneurship is a real thing. It's a real phenomena. It's worth talking about. It's even worth studying, and it's characterized by a certain mindset, specific skills, that kind of thing. So hopefully we've established at this point, hey, we've got a new species of leadership we can look at. So my closing point here, I want to make in the next few minutes, is to say that there are scores of these kinds of ventures on campus. They're at very different stages of development. And I think that in order to help us, to help these institutions and these entrepreneurs, we have to understand these stages of development a little bit. And if I could have slide 4, so if you look at the Institute as an example, the idea to venture stage, Reuel was sitting around with the humanities professors complaining about things and then getting a concept. And then the launch to pilot was that early stage in Tiny West House, where they began to practice with the fellows program in its early stages. When they raised some money to really build out this program, that would be the growth stage for the Institute. And then at some point, the university said, wow, this is good. We need this. Let's build this out more. And here's a prime piece of real estate you can build Hyde Hall on. And that is a stage, that was kind of an example of the innovation being adopted by the university, that stage. And then the Partner for Impact is when the Institute became a primary source of fundraising for the university, when it added programs in leadership, programs of support, department chairs across the campus. So that's an illustration of this 5 stages. And so I'm talking about, so I'll take that off the screen now. And I'm saying that Carolina can do a better job of helping these many entrepreneurial ventures. First of all, identifying them, supporting them, and helping them through these 5 stages. Not all of them will become these powerhouses like we've illustrated. Some will be important just at the department level, or they'll be key to a certain discipline, and some will be campus-wide and have even great impact on society, like some of the programs I've talked about. So what would help us do this? Let's show slide 5 now as we close out. So I want to say, before talking about the items on this slide, is that we have already with Innovate Carolina, which is the 15-year initiative that Judith Cohn, who is the Vice Chancellor for Innovation, has pioneered. We really already have a pipeline of innovation for entrepreneurial ventures. And again, those are the ventures that are really influencing outside of the university. And really what my recommendation is that we take the same idea that we've developed to support entrepreneurial ventures and use them to support intrapreneurial ventures. And this is what that would look like. And in this list, you'll see some things we already have going that we could just adapt. And I don't mean just adapt, it will take effort. But we have a head start in building what I'm calling the pipeline for innovation. For the people at the idea stage, we have the faculty boot camp already. We have Startup Carolina and the Keenan Flagler Business School, and we have leadership programs to help folks who have interesting ideas. So tweaking these programs so that entrepreneurship becomes part of the curriculum is being important. Once a venture is started, we need some folks to help them do the key planning to take them to the crucial stages. And we had a program like that in the Center for Faculty Excellence that I worked with, and James Measer worked with, and Judith worked with, and that's something we could bring back in some form. Once a program has a clear direction of where it wants to go to grow or to renew itself, then we could continue with coaching, targeted funds and grants, technical assistance, and so on. So what we have now that are like this, we do this for other kinds of academic leaders. So there's the Engaged Scholars Program, there's the Chairs Leadership Program. In terms of technical assistance, Paul Friega has a wonderful program in the Keenan Flagler Business School called STAR, which helps programs in the private sector, and they've also done some wonderful work folks in the university, so making that assistance available. Once a program gets through that level, people at the department level, the university level, the school level can say, okay, I want to adopt this and build it. And then at the end of the day, some of these will become programs that will have a big impact. And like the Institute, like the Lineberger Cancer Center, like the Carolina Population Center, like the Southern Oral History Project, they will have impact beyond even their original ambitious visions. So with that, I'll just close by saying that we're at a time of great change. We're experiencing unprecedented disruption and a kind of reset of the university, and many other programs in society are going to have to take place. And I would just suggest that in terms of that reset, we think about how we support innovation throughout the campus, and that how do we prepare ourselves to accelerate needed changes to address the kinds of problems that we're experiencing now and the next roadway that comes at us, and the constant changes that we're experiencing. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to a conversation. Thanks for hanging in there with me.
David, thank you for that wide-ranging and very provocative set of ideas about innovation and entrepreneurship at Carolina and beyond. I would like to open it up now for questions, comments, conversation from the audience. Please don't be shy. You can either click the raise your hand button or just enter something in the chat, and I'll be happy to call upon you. I have a question from Jeffrey Moe. Please go ahead.
David, thanks for reminding us of Reuel Tyson. I'm struck by one thing. You said an untraditional leadership style. The only other person in that list that I know is Barbara Reimer. And the thing that strikes me, and just thinking of those two, is that to do the innovation internally is a bit different than externally. You're entrepreneur. And I wonder if your findings, if you're being led to, or other people in this discussion, that there's a pretty powerful dose of political acumen that one needs to identify an internal problem and not just sound like you're nagging, to connect it to something that matters to the university, to secure resources and motivate others. Seems to me that adds up to a lot of political acumen. And I just wonder if that's part of where you're going with identifying this. And the last comment I'll make is I had this vague memory, and I did a quick search. I'm reminded in the Chronicle of Higher Education, there was an article called "Faculty Members Can Lead, but Will They?" And it hinted at or made direct reference to this notion of being able to be more politically astute internally was required than if you're an external entrepreneur.
Jeff, I'll say that kind of the rap on faculty members in general is that they don't have this political acumen, and they're more interested in the ideas than the ability to implement. And that, so I would say one of the characteristics of an academic entrepreneur is that they have or they developed it. And it involves being able to see, to match where the university is going or wants to go, what opportunities there are in society, and you know, the realities of the organization that they lead and how that all fits together. And in the case of Barbara Reimer, she's kind of at the level 5. She was already leading the School of Public Health, which was the #1 public health school in the country, or maybe sometimes second to Harvard. No, the #1 public health school consistently. but she didn't stop there. She felt there was a real opportunity for the School of Public Health to become even more successful by going global. And that was something the university had already committed to, global. And she found Dennis Gillings and Joan Gillings who were willing to support that with a $40 million gift. And so that's a pretty, and then many things have flowed from that. And certainly this, in the time, at this point in time, that seems like a very smart and wise thing to do, that we have a global School of Public Health at this time. So she did have that political skill. And Barbara, I think, came from NIH. She was not a classic academic. Maybe that's something to look for. She had come from NIH before and ran their cancer programs. And so maybe it's some way we get this entrepreneurial spirit if we import some folks from outside. Buck Goldstein would be another example. I think on campus now, the Dean of Journalism, Susan King, came from public policy. And so, yeah, so I think that's a good observation, great observation.
I think Bill Andrews has a hand up.
David, thank you. That was an overview that really covered the waterfront thoroughly. I wondered, what would you say among all the things that the university needs to do the most to foster more entrepreneurial talent? What would you put your finger on and say, is there something in particular that Carolina either is doing really well and should do better than it already is because it's doing it well, or something that Carolina really has not focused on, and if they would, it would really make a big difference?
Well, I think that Chancellor Kevin Guskowitz and others have adopted the tagline or the slogan of "Let's make innovation fundamental at Carolina." So I'll say, in terms of a positive, they've highlighted that as something that we as an institution are committed to. That we're committed to innovation as an institution, and that is a wonderful opportunity for people like me and others who have ideas for change to tie into that, and it opens the door. So I feel like they have opened the door rhetorically for us to talk about innovation, and now we have to all walk through it. And I'm arguing that some way of making the concept of entrepreneurship more valued is another way to build on, to put meat on the bones, or of the idea of innovation made fundamental. So how do we recognize our entrepreneurs? How do we support them? How do we identify what they need? How do we coach? What kind of resources are we putting behind that rhetoric? And I'm hoping that this talk will begin a conversation about that. And
Great. Thank you. The next hand up is Suzanne Gullidge. Suzanne, please go ahead.
Thank you. I got a phone call just as I was preparing to speak. I've got that straight. It'll wait. David, thank you for a really interesting and provocative presentation. It struck me that you were uniquely experienced and uniquely knowledgeable to approach such a book on entrepreneurship with the calling on the examples you have, and nothing's more motivating than to be reminded of the trajectory of leadership of people that you know, and know them to be good folks but with exceptional commitments and accomplishments. at one point I was thinking about when you talked about the steps from, going from disgruntled to action, and in the stage, where you said, okay, next, attract supporters and resources. Reminded me kind of the old adage about, making elephant soup is really easy. You just get an elephant and put it in a 1,000-pound pot, and then add these spices. An observation that about that, which is, none of us would say that's a simple step, but and there are a lot of factors that contribute to people who are able to do that. I'm wondering what you're thinking about the happy, unhappy coincidence of the time in which we are living in relation to the future that this proposal that you have and what you're writing about is attending to. Specifically, I observed that as we've, in our continuing work with the current academic leaders, for example, and other groups of faculty with which I'm associated now in the past 5 weeks, the conversations take the tone of reset. It's time to reset, and I think you use that term. But people seem to be unusually introspective. Maybe this will go away, but people are talking about my need to reset my own life and to put my energies in places that I have not put them before. When I think of the calendar that I would have been keeping and all that I would be doing, maybe I don't need to do that much. Maybe I've got more interior work to do. And I don't know, I have no answer. It's just an observation with a cue to wonder on my own about what the current time and what the kind of rumination and commitment that people are making when we're in this isolation, how it will affect university engagement. Perhaps we'll be so anxious to get out of this and go back to normal, but I'm wondering whether there will ever be a normal and a pace of life that we have known in the near future. So again, I applaud what you're doing and appreciate it, and particularly because it spurs conversation and reflection on what the next normal for us might be. Did it strike you? Have you given thought to the idea that my proposals are landing on the ears of others at this particular point in history?
Yes. I would say I would respond in several ways. One, there is this external need to rethink a lot of things. So, in our society, we're now rethinking healthcare and how it's delivered, how retail, what's that going to be in the future? Almost transportation, what can that be like with social distancing? So we're doing a kind of very big reset, and now I think, as you say, at the same time we're all kind of stressed and worried, thinking about our mortality and sense of isolation and loneliness. And the question is, well, how can I address these overwhelming challenges when I myself am struggling? So I don't think there is an easy answer to that, but I do think that one is being in community with others and sharing concerns. And in some ways, the society as a whole is going to be like Reuel's brown bag lunch, where people are sitting around and sharing their feelings until positive ideas emerge. So I think it's kind of let's commit to being together in community and figuring this out together. And it's okay, I think, to express your own concerns and reservations. And those of you who were in the leadership program, and you may still be doing this, where people look at their own lives and talk about their leadership commitments for the next few years and how their own lives. So I feel it's fundamental that leaders have to look at themselves and where they are in their lives and the lives of their family and their own health and what is it they really commit to. And I don't think that the current crisis changes that and intensifies that. But I think nevertheless, there is some, for many people, there will be some positive integration of what they need to do for themselves and what they need to do in order to address the world's problems or their community's problems, the university's problems, that we'll have. I'm hopeful and confident we will have a new generation of leaders to do this.
David, I don't see any more hands raised right now, so I'm going to jump in and just ask you. It struck me that your list is a sort of a who's who of important folks at Carolina over the last couple of decades, and that these are a remarkable group of people with a remarkably diverse set of backgrounds and sort of pathways to doing the extraordinary work that you've identified. What I am wondering is, in sociology, we would say this is sampling on the dependent variable. You've looked for the things that are similar among the success stories. Do you know of important cases of good ideas that have failed? Places where better investment or better support would have potentially made a big difference in entrepreneurs within Carolina who have not been able to make the change that they'd hoped.
Well, let me respond to that question first by talking about where this list came from. So, and I would say this whole, if to the extent this what I'm doing is scientific, it's kind of observational. It's I'm like a naturalist, and I'm wandering around and I'm seeing these things, and I'm saying, oh, hey, there's a pattern here. But the way this came about was that when James Measer and I were doing a leadership program on strategy, after the work that we did on the IAH leadership program, several of us felt this was terrific, but we didn't do enough on strategy. So, and we couldn't in that format. So we had the opportunity to create another leadership program. And then we decided, and Buck Goldstein was involved, and James Measer and Judith Cohn. And then we decided, well, if we want to do something, how do we show people what they should aspire to? And James, in particular, was enamored of the good to great framework by Stanford professor and later mega consultant Jim Collins. And so, and we did a survey. Who would we say had done who started a long time ago, but then emerged to the top of Carolina? And that's where this list came from. And you can see, and we did interviews with each one of them. And these interviews are all on the Carolina's YouTube channel now. You can look at them. And then this didn't crystallize in my mind until I began to do these courses. Then I found people who were not at this high level of impact and leadership, but they were just starting out programs in pharmacy or medicine, or they ran labs, but they had visions and goals, and they were very passionate about what they were doing. And so it occurred to me that, and I can give you lots of examples of people who I don't think had the skills or had the good ideas or had the support to take their things forward. Mm-hmm. But I think somewhere there's a gray area of the things that should be moving forward, but the support is not forthcoming, and that's the sweet spot that I want to work in. I think we should be working in. I also, in relation to Suzanne's comments about the current crisis, it may be that we need to give more emphasis to the beginning of the pipeline, the creative ideas that could solve problems, and really think more about how do we get those ideas into the hopper and how do we get them to be beginning as pilots. So a different kind of support, a higher level of front-end support to get more interesting pilots going so that we have more things in the pipeline. So that may be a response to the current crisis.
Yep, yep. I'll ask a follow-up since there are still no additional hands at the moment. So one set of questions is entrepreneurs who failed. The other point is, academics are really great at innovation. We come up with lots of ideas all the time. Some of those ideas are not particularly good, and I'm interested in what the mechanisms ought to be by which the university might not just support entrepreneurship, but also, winnow between the ideas that are worth pursuing and those that are not.
Well, in terms of, I think the Institute, I have some familiarity with the Institute has been trying to, over the years, do something for associate professors. And if we go back over the history of that program, there were several false starts, some things that went really well, but then were not continued, and then finally a good formula came about, with the work that Jeff Zermacore was doing. So I think there is a kind of a trial and error and a willingness to persevere and to find the right. So emphasizing the willingness to persevere is significant. And the second part of your question was, winnowing. Okay, so I don't think it's so much as winnowing as choosing. So if you had support groups for entrepreneurs, and maybe you had 5 support groups with 7 or 8 people, which we have an example of that in the academic leadership program, continuing groups now. The 50 or so programs and ventures for people would be on somebody's radar screen. Mm-hmm. And then it would be more possible to select. And so decision makers would have more variety to choose from if they build a bigger pool of ideas and are willing to invest a limited amount of resources to get things to a stage where they can evaluate whether or not it makes sense. So I think it's more increasing the pool to select rather than winnowing down. It's not everything that's going to get chosen.
Fair enough. Great. I think Brian Buxton has a hand up.
Hi, I'll just try to say a few words without being too incoherent. I think that I'm very impressed with this, and it's very important. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
No. It's very important to understand the characteristics of the successful academic entrepreneur and a successful entrepreneur venture. There's a couple of paradoxes, though. One is that I would say that most successful entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs did not set out to become great entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. They set out to push forward a particular idea they had that they felt was for the greater good. And I know in business, successful entrepreneurs are the people who have jumped the gap from the product to the customer. And instead of talking about how great their product is and designing the product, they're going out and doing, as David, great phrase, precinct work, and talking to customers and finding out what do the customers really need, and that becoming the driving energy of the vision and the activity. And I don't know, if I step back, I would say the role of getting a bachelor's degree, the purpose of getting a bachelor's degree in the arts and humanities has changed a great deal since 1970 when I got mine at UNC. And it's much more about going into the larger economy. And there are a lot of very, very bright students in the arts and humanities, but there are not enough places in academia to take them up. And they face a great challenge finding interesting jobs in the larger world. And they need skills, and they need contacts, and they need experiences, which, without being critical, seem to be in short supply within this somewhat sealed off world of the university itself. And I'm just wondering, And I just finished this book by Case and Deaton called Deaths of Despair, two Princeton economists, and talking about how important a bachelor's degree is, how important it is to get into a productive work. What sort of focus is there on the needs of the students to get a better preparation in their 4 years as an undergrad to go into the greater world? And I guess our graduation is pretty good, but Case and Dean talked about a very high percentage of people who start bachelor's degrees and don't finish, which is a double whammy because they don't have the degree in the marketplace and they have all the debt. So what's the focus on how to better prepare students for opportunities outside the world of Chapel Hill?
So one of the things you raise is how does the university link address the needs of the greater society as they change and emerge, particularly the students are teaching. But if you look at the list of entrepreneurs, you see that they're the people who are really tackling that, like Pat Tequila, who talked about inquiry-based learning, or Buck Goldstein with the entrepreneurship minor, or Shirley Art, who just said, we can't let people graduate with this level of debt. And so if we put forward, the list of problems or concerns that are coming to the university, and we encourage people, faculty members, not every faculty member is going to be so inclined, a small minority will be, but if among those, there will be these people who have creative ideas to make significant changes that will address some of these problems. And I think we have ample evidence that faculty are able to do that, and there are some who are quite engaged with this, and this will be their contribution. I could give you another list of people who are not on my slides who are also.
So is there a next level of unmet needs, or is everything okay?
Well, I think that Buck Goldstein's book and with Holden Thorpe's book about the partnership between the universities and the country suggests there are some serious disconnects that we need to bridge. So I'll go with that reference.
Thanks.
Andy, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's a rookie error for Zoom. David, thank you so much for a provocative discussion, a great conversation, great questions. Thank you all for participating in the IAH Zoom Talks. We are scheduling more of these. We're looking at one sometime next month. We'll be featuring Jane Thrailkill on aging, the meaning of aging in the time of COVID. So keep your eyes open for that. But meanwhile, please all join me in thanking David Kiel. Whoops, there's a chat. May 14th will be Jane Thrailkill's talk. So meanwhile, please all join me in thanking David Kiel for this great conversation. Everyone stay warm, stay healthy, stay safe, and thanks again from the IAH.
Appreciate it.